And we're live. Hello and welcome to Media Studies. I'm James Brown. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Sabby Reyes Kulkarni. How are you?
I'm great, James. Thanks for having me again. How are you?
I'm all right. A little bit down, but I'll ramp up. I'm sure.
Mm, mm.
You know. Um. Uh. So, Sabby, give us a quick
Yes.
plug. What are you doing these days? Anything interesting on your plate?
Yes. I just impromptu on, I think it was Thursday night or something, wrote a Substack post in response to a press release I got. I think it's called "It's Time to Decolonize Decolonization," which actually that title has been used before, but in a different context, where I decry the uniformity of like rhetoric that is, in my view, is just sort of drowning artistic expression and the coverage of it. I'm working on two other Substack articles and also a retrospective piece on three albums that came out yesterday, March 8th, 1994. Soundgarden Super Unknown, Downward Spiral by the Nine Inch Nails, and an album named Magnified by Failure, which is one of my favorite bands. Working on that. I'm working on a music review of the new Julian Lage, and it looks like I'm starting. Just got the go ahead to start a column, a monthly 10 ambient albums we recommend kind of column.
There's 2 points I want to back up on because that's super exciting. Number one, Downward Spiral is one of my favorite albums ever.
Mm.
I am I am nuts about that era of Nine Inch Nails. I think that it gorgeous is the adjective that I use, and people think, oh, it's inappropriate because it's Nine Inch Nails, but I think
Mm.
it's gorgeous. I
Mm-hmm.
love like the sensation that it gives me and the sonics of it. It's so unique for that time. I know there's other pieces that were kind of like it, and other bands that are kind of leaning in the right direction. But I thought that was one of the, certainly a high point from my perspective. What's yours on it?
I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I don't remember that album feeling especially even depressing to me because I was so drawn in by the sonics of it, which I do think are gorgeous. And a really good friend of mine, shout out to my friend Paul Lembo, uh, um, almost ruined it once for me because he was like, well, these lyrics, and there's a section towards the end of the record that I always thought sounded really interesting and cool. And then he showed me the lyrics, and it's like there's a hole and the splattering of the brains all over the wall. It's obviously like a kind of a pointed, like rubbing our noses in his suicidal or someone's suicidal ideation. But even still, I'm with you. I like, yeah, I think when I was in my 20s when they came out and I was like high all the time, I'm sure some of it I got into like the angsty parts of it, but my recollection of that experience as a whole is just like that. The music sounds like what that cover looks like it's rust, it's beautiful, it's got all these like color contours. So Sammy Hagar once said on either VH1 or MTV, he said, I'm almost envious of people that can tap into that kind of depth of unhappiness.
The depth of unhappiness.
That's, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but something like that. That he felt like, wow, that it takes something to be able to express that. I just don't find Nine Inch Nails. It's such a creative triumph that's what I respond to. The album afterwards is more truly depressing to me, but also in a way that I really enjoy. So,
I I want to step back to the depths of unhappiness and expressing that as a
mhm.
creative act because I think that's fascinating. It's not something that's talked about a ton, but I think it is that I think expressing unhappiness is a very common aesthetic, a very common foundation of art at large.
Hmm.
And your reams and reams of music writing, I mean, is that something that you have seen? And also, the inverse of that, expressing happiness seems to be the same as well. So it's like as I'm just thinking aloud here, but expressing art and feelings, especially in music, seems to be focused on the extremes.
Yes, or a kind of a superficial, or what I find is a superficial presentation of each. So to me, something like, I don't know, something that tries to be really dark and evil can be just as hollow as like Britney Spears or whatever, some bubblegum stuff. I find that it's kind of like you oatmeal, right? If you want oatmeal to be sweet, you need a little bit of salt in it, and vice versa. If you want to like marinate like salmon, you want to put something sweet to cut the savory salty. And the music that really reaches me has some offsetting, some, there's contours to it. Um Stuff that is like sort of unrelenting in one corner or another just doesn't do it. But with that said, I love the song Happy by Pharrell. I think that song is awesome. I mean, it kind of feels like what it gets me. I mean, so I don't
You
know how
have
since
you have to keep going here. Give us a bit off the top. Tell us why you love Happy so
I don't
much.
know. I mean, and I take it seriously too. It's not like something like there's some stuff we hear that, oh, that's like kind of junk foody fun. Like I'm cool with it, it's kind of like bubblegum. But that, no, no, no. I take that song 100%. Like musically, it's wonderful to me. I don't know. I honestly haven't given it that much thought. I just know when it's on, it it grabs me. But even there's like TV jingles. There was a Wegmans jingle. Oh my god, it'll come to me in a second. You'll recognize it from football. Um,
Okay.
it'll come to me in a second. But I'm as much of a music snob as I am, and as I like to filter stuff out, certain things get through, and it's all good. I think the song is constructed beautifully. The vibe, um, that chorus, man, just it's just this like wonderful thing, just kind of washing over me.
I shout out to Pharrell
Hmm.
and
I,
shout out to the listeners on X.
I mean, listen, my friend Paul, the same guy, made fun of me for years because the song "Baby Baby" by Amy Grant is one of my favorite songs ever. So
Baby
it's
Baby
like,
by Amy Grant,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Christian
Yes.
singer from the
Yeah,
90s.
but she had a big hit in like 1991 called Baby Baby. Ever since the day you put my heart in motion, baby, that's the day. Just no getting over you. That's one of my top 10 songs ever.
Wow. Ever.
Yeah. Yes.
What's one?
Yes.
What's number
I
one?
don't know. It's too many. I can't. There's too many top 10 for me. If I started making a list, it'd be like hard to narrow down probably to like 100. But like that song is up there.
Okay.
Um, there's too many songs. I'm like, oh yeah, that song. Oh yeah, that song. Oh yeah, that song. But I mean,
So
that song is fluffy pop, and but yet it dude, that song comes on in the supermarket. You and me are talking. I'm gonna have to be like, there's like a bridge section. That I'm just gonna have to stop and like just take it all in.
I'm trying to think of what my version of that would be. I mean, especially from that era, I Lisa Loeb's Stay.
You should get glasses. We should both get glasses like her.
Definitely. Start bopping my head,
Hmm.
totally into it. It's not a thing, like I'm just
Hmm.
rocking it immediately.
You know what song I would put up there with both of these? There's a song called "I Know" by Dion Ferris. I
Don't know her.
believe she was a
Or,
member of. Was she in Arrested Development?
oh, was she?
I believe so.
Like
Yeah. So
Tennessee, Mr. Window.
yes. Let me look that up now. So I'm being responsible. But it's I know what you're doing lately. I know
Oh,
what
yeah,
you're
I know
doing.
that song. That's a great song.
I adore that song.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
take it a little more serious. Well, that's more the type of thing that I would take seriously than Baby Baby. But to me, Baby Baby's not a guilty pleasure. It's like no, no, no. I legit fucking am crazy about that song. Um and but Happy and I Know What You're Doing to me musically are on the same par. Like the way they're made, they're soulful, they just happen to be popular.
Well, speaking of things that just happen to be popular, I want to throw something at you.
Mhm.
Something I find absurd that's just about to happen. Something that fits in with the topic at hand with about how not to make money in media and how to make money in media.
Mhm.
Jake Paul and Mike Tyson are going to have a fight.
Well, I mean, does that fall under how to not make money?
Well, I think it falls on the weird state of our media marketplace. The fact that we have a former Disney kid who's turned into a fighting promoter, fighting a 57-year-old former world champion boxer,
Mhm.
and that this is happening live on Netflix, which is a whole other level of this, which
Mhm.
is Netflix is moving hard into live stuff.
Mhm. So is HBO with sports.
Yeah. I mean, from what I understand, that's the plan with Max. Right now you can stream a version of CNN. Right now you can stream some sports properties. It'll be behind a bit of a further paywall in the future. At least that's the current version of that. But yeah, I mean, but with Tyson, do you want to see a 57-year-old fight a 27-year-old?
I mean, uh, I would be curious as to how much he still got it. I mean, the dude was just terrifying for most of his. If I mean, just it was the one the Buster Douglas loss that kind of things unraveled. It seems from there, right? Do I have my timeline correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
I watched that live with my mom, by the way, not in the building, but on TV. And I remember Buster Douglas crying because his mom had just died weeks before that fight. Um, I mean, I personally don't find Jake Paul compelling in the slightest. I think he is the poster child for like sort of everything that's wrong with the current we're in, where we're all trying to get attention. And I just find him and his brother to be they get attention because they get attention. But I mean, kudos to him for putting him. I mean, that takes guts to do that. I don't care if he's 57. Mike Tyson is still Mike Tyson, and I'd be curious to see what kind of shape Mike Tyson is in. I have a feeling he's gonna kick Jake Paul's ass. That's my sense. But sportscasters, I quickly looked through what they were saying, and they think Mike Tyson's gonna get knocked out of the ring.
I don't think so. I'd be shocked if he was knocked out of the ring. I know he had a fight with another. I think it was with Roy Jones a couple years ago. Um, and it has been a couple of years, but he still looks mighty enough, and he waxed Roy Jones.
Okay, well,
I
now,
don't think he get knocked out of the ring. It might last longer than young Mike would have, because young
mm,
Mike would have knocked the he would have knocked the hell out of Jake Paul and landed him in 10 seconds. But I think it may be a lot like the I don't know if you watched any of the Francis Ngannou, Anthony Joshua, or heard anything about it. For those who don't know, Francis Ngannou was a UFC heavyweight champion. Has this amazing, compelling story. The man literally worked in a sand mine as a kid, ended up homeless in France, and cleaning buildings. And someone said, "Hey, you should try MMA." End up heavyweight champion of the world.
wow.
Wow. He had a dispute over money with the UFC. He fought out his contract and went over to boxing, where you can make a lot more money in boxing because there's less rules. There's less of there are competing organizations that structure boxing instead of really a few smaller groups that control everything in the MMA. He knocked out a champion. I'm forgetting his name right now. A couple months ago, and then he faced Anthony Joshua, who knocked him the fuck out in two rounds last night.
Hmm. I was watching something that was streaming somewhere that I came across. There was some fight. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't watch MMA or UFC or boxing because I just don't feel adequate about how I've um uh, kept my own physical abilities. This- So watching people who are like really um so watching people who are really really super powerful physical specimens, it's not that I'm would even mind if someone was more someone's more powerful than me. It's just that I just don't take care of that aspect, and I feel like I should. And so I'm just like, nah, I can't watch this. It's not the same as like watching an awesome musician or even an athlete, like football player or whatever, doing something I can't do. Um, and there's just something about the rest of us sitting around on chairs watching these people be gladiators that I find really unsettling. But that's not what you're getting at. And what's really interesting to me is that Mike Tyson is the inverse media story or culture story as Jake Paul. Mike Tyson is popular now because he has substance, because he has a ton more substance than anybody would have even known, even maybe even himself. I don't even know. Right now, the guy sounds like fucking half one step away from Buddha in the way he
Yeah,
talks.
he's become a sage.
Right. And that's why so I love that. I'd still be nervous to be on his show and like and not make him angry. Like sometimes there's
Yeah.
moments where you're like, "Nah," like when Bill Maher was like, "Sure, let me talk," right? He's just like, "Oh, dude, don't trigger him."
Well, there was a moment, I believe it was on an airplane, where a guy did confront him for no reason,
Hmm.
I believe I saw a video of this. It was terrifying.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, don't. He's still
Mike
got whatever that is.
huge.
He's still got whatever that is, that whatever that trigger is. But a friend of mine said that he thought Mike Tyson was always sensitive and just didn't have a way to there's no outlet for that, and now he's finally so I find that to be, as much as we can complain about where things are going, dude, there's a lot of amazing stuff that's rising to the top. And Mike Tyson's a perfect example. I don't know that any of the sportscasters I listened to said he was going to get knocked out of the ring. I might have misspoken there, but there was this reaction oh, does he need the money? Does he, is it this like somehow he's lowering himself to this? And I have a feeling he's going to hold his own more than well.
Well, a couple years ago, and I believe this may be where this fight, other than the money grubbing, of course, comes from. Mike Tyson was on a podcast, and he was asked, "Could you fuck up Jake Paul?" And what do you think Mike Tyson said?
Of course.
He said, "So fucking easy."
Mm, okay. How do we know that wasn't orchestrated to pave the way for this?
It's a 2-year stretch. Maybe it was, but it was 2 years ago. That's a lot of premeditation if that was set up.
Mm.
That could Mike want or need the money? Sure. Jake Paul obviously wants the money, but I don't think Mike would do this just for money.
Yeah, I
Um,
have no idea. I mean, I have, you got to wonder when people they get to the top of the mountain in their whatever it is, they're just as curious to show that they still got it too. I think, it's like a challenge. Like,
So fucking easy.
Jake Paul is obviously,
He's
big.
beautiful. My family loves Jake Paul.
Could you fuck him
Oh,
up?
so fucking easy.
Jake Paul is obviously,
He's
big.
beautiful.
obviously, very, very edited there, but
Mhm.
yes, that's the genesis of this all.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason it's compelling is because it's Mike Tyson. I just find the Paul brothers just there's nothing there for me. It's like the crass pursuit of fame and attention without anything guiding it. And good for them, I guess. But so I see this as a collision of substance versus fluff.
Interesting. Substance versus fluff.
Yeah.
I don't see it that way at all. I think that the fact that they've been able to create the business that they've been able to do is incredibly impressive. Both in different lanes. I believe Logan is wrestling, and Jake is boxing, and
Mhm.
they both have weird crypto scams, and I believe a energy drink in their empire as well. As long as
One of them does, I think.
one of them, I don't know if
I
they
don't remember because I saw them
together.
arguing about. Yeah, even that was uninteresting when they were arguing on one of their like one of their endorsements. One of them didn't want the one of their sponsors didn't want the other one to represent a rival energy drink at
Mm.
the other one's event, and whatever.
But I find the fact that they've taken advantage of a very disjointed on falling apart media space and have created a business around their personalities
Mhm.
and around them taking massive risks. Wrestling and obviously boxing is a whole other level than wrestling.
Yeah, but they're doing it in a way that is like a sideshow of all of those things. Like at least
Y-
people
Yeah,
always sort of put an asterisk. It seems like it's like, well, is he really a boxer? Yes, he's boxing,
yeah.
but it's
It's not a pure art approach to it, but
right.
it never is. It
Hmm.
wasn't for Mike Tyson. I mean, part of the appeal of Tyson was the sideshow that he put on. The fact that he knocked guys out incredibly fast. The fact that he was such a weird guy. That he talked a little strange.
But he
That
did, but he did legitimately go through, like, come up the boxing ranks. He wasn't like a personality first.
so what would you expect of someone like Jake Paul to start from the absolute bottom?
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of, like, it's kind of the argument that you get about podcasters versus radio, where it's like, hey, I think of this argument that Howard Stern made a few years ago about Ari
Oh
Shaffir,
yeah.
where he said that, hey, Ari didn't go to a small market, make his bones, and climb up.
Mhm.
He's just on a podcast. Well, we're in an environment where the world is flipped on its side, where media companies aren't making money like they used to, where things are where it's just, hey, would someone just give me a Saturday afternoon show to have a conversation like this? Probably not like this. And this obviously didn't exist in this way 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago when we talk about Tyson and Howard Stern. So, but now that it does exist, now that you can just say, hey, I want to have my own pay-per-view and I'm going to set up with somebody to fight. And I think he fought a couple former NBA players first. I think Nate Robinson was one of them. Then he fought MMA fighters.
Mhm.
And you could do that today. You couldn't do that yesterday.
I think your comparison, the analogy between podcasts and radio, is certainly fair. I wouldn't make it, and the distinction is podcasting is legitimately its own art form, and it does evolve out of the previous. It does. It's like a mutation of radio broadcasting. It involves some of the same elements. This is more people getting pulled, athletes and entire sports being pulled into the centrifugal force or the gravitational force of attention seeking for its own sake. Simply because someone has succeeded at that, then they can start pulling these legitimate figures in athletics towards them. And I find that gross. Like, yeah, I guess you can say the Floyd Mayweather, what's that fucking Irish, Conor McGregor. I guess that is a similar thing.
And variations of that have happened throughout history. I mean, I think
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali fought a wrestler. Like
Okay.
you go back further and further back, you find this over and over again.
I mean, it reminds me of, was it Wilt Chamberlain who was in martial arts movies, or one of them, against Bruce Lee? Who was it? Which,
Not sure about that one.
I don't remember who it was. There was an NBA player who like suddenly showed
Could be
up in one
Kareem
of those.
Abdul-Jabbar.
Maybe, yes.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah. And I just remember thinking, even as a kid, that there was something hokey and ridiculous about that. I don't like the idea of like legit sports all being turned into the WWE. And Jake Paul seems to be an agent of turning everything into that. like that's what he's sort of sprinkling P.T. Barnum dust on everything.
No, I don't disagree, but I do think you're missing something.
Yeah, interest.
Well, not just that.
No, I know. You think there's something I'm not seeing?
Yeah,
Properly. Yeah.
I think it was already going that way. And I think this ties into one of these things that we were planning to go into later. In that, as media erodes, as the financial model of media erodes, and it moves from a more secure indirect model, meaning, think things like broadcast television, cable television, newspaper ads, as those things bear fewer fruit, we move to subscription models and one-off payments. The attention economy has taken over. And it took over long before Jake Paul. He's only an island in the stream. Like
You're
he's
saying he's a symptom, not the.
absolutely,
He's the proverbial symptom, not the disease.
without a doubt. He's a reflection of the times and the environment, not a person who's a revolutionary.
I just find him. There's something about his whole vibe that I find off-putting.
I agree with that. I find it off-putting. I find his own vibe. I think both Paul brothers I find off-putting. I think they're not great for humanity.
Right. They're not even great for entertainment or the attention economy. Right?
But I also think that they are simply taking advantage of their time.
Right. And see where you would say, well, listen, they're killing it. So we've got to acknowledge, for better or worse, they're here. I hesitate to give them attention. Now, Mike Tyson being there, I'm going to watch. I'll be curious what happens. And also, I'm waiting for Jake Paul's luck to run out. He's clearly very fit, obviously, right? But I mean, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, he hasn't spent a life in a discipline of any of these.
I think there was some amateur boxing,
but it's not the life discipline that's required of a boxer, correct?
I would agree. I would agree with that. And if he was facing a boxer in his prime, much like Francis Ngannou, I think he would get his ass kicked.
Okay, so there is something. It's like, when is this guy's luck? When is somebody going to pull this guy's card and really either humiliate or hurt him?
Hence why Mike was asked what he was asked. And I think whether it's MMA fighter after MMA fighter and boxer after boxer, athlete after athlete have been asked similar questions because he's embarrassed guy after guy. And he shocked me in a lot of this. I expected. I think he fought Tyron Woodley, who's another world champion UFC fighter who was known as a striker, but striking in UFC is a lot different than striking in boxing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So,
or Steve Kim when we need him, right?
Yeah. Shout out to Steve Kim. Yeah, Steve Kim's the best. I'd love to have one of these conversations with Steve Kim. We should invite him on. He might do it. Steve Kim would illustrate this better than either of us could. If you are, and this is where you're absolutely correct. He doesn't have a dedicated discipline. And there's I was trying to think of, I just saw a quote earlier today, I think that fits this. Give me one moment.
Sure.
It was about the Joshua Ngannou fight last night. It's from Robin Black. And I'll put it up on the screen real quick. For those who don't know, we're going live on YouTube. Okay, let me I don't know if you can see that, Savvy. Can you read that?
Yes, I can. I can.
Okay. Joshua displayed the awesome power of a lifetime of skill development. True mastery is not so much a goal as it is simply a consequence of a lifelong commitment to the process. And I think that's what you were saying.
Well, I mean, for some people, that's what it is, right? And then there are people who are just innately gifted who don't have to. But there's something insulting to these sports that every time Jake Paul circles around and pulls somebody, and I wonder how many legit fighters would be like, well, I'm beneath doing that because he's not a real whatever. I mean, I'm sure they'd want the money because he's an attraction.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's what's attracted the retired NBA player and the MMA fighter, because retired NBA players are no longer making a big check.
Of course.
MMA fighter. I mean, Francis Ngannou was heavyweight champion of the world. Do you know what his last win he made in the UFC?
What are we talking? At least 7 years? I have no idea. I'm just guessing.
He made $500,000.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay.
I believe last night he made something like 7 million.
Sure. And so he doesn't mind. I mean, of course. And then to channel my inner Jason Whitlock, former NBA players, got baby mamas, living a lifestyle, like, that kind of thing. And yeah, this is, you're right. We're wrong to decry the corrupting influence of this as if it's anything new. I mean, broadsheet newspapers back in the 1800s were worse than clickbait, or just as bad, right? Is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So
Oh, my bad. I shortchanged Francis. He made 20 million minimum.
This time.
This time.
Yeah.
Via Forbes, that's their estimate. And it's Forbes, so you have to take it with some salt. But that sounds about right. Joshua is a gigantic pay-per-view draw.
First of all, what stage of the fight was this?
This was in the second round.
Oh my
and for those who are
God.
not watching the video, we're watching repeatedly Anthony Joshua knock Francis Ngannou the fuck out.
But I mean, Francis Ngannou could do that to like what percentage of the human population, male population?
99.99999999999. He
And
just
also,
ran 0.000000001.
right. And also, the only reason he's suffered that fate is because he's not in his prime, as you're saying.
Well, no, it's not that he's not in his prime. He's not a trained boxer.
Oh, okay. Yes. Of course. Okay. So I mean, this is like, I don't know, taking NFL players and putting them on a rugby pitch.
Yeah, like and the inverse happens. Well, rugby players have come and played in the NFL. Few have made teams.
Sure.
No one's become a star.
They're usually special teams guys, right? Or are they
teamers have happened? There was a guy who kicked a field goal to win the game for the Texans this year. The Bills had a guy named Christian Wade a few years ago who returned a few touchdowns in the preseason. He looked good, but he wasn't fluent on the intricacies of the game. He was it was something that he was trying to pick up at 28. So it's one of the things that's happening with sports. If you pick it up early, you put Francis Ngannou, if you had him boxing at 18.
Right. Where would he be versus this guy? You know what I'm saying?
I think it would be a competitive fight. Joshua has been boxing since he was a child.
Right. So what, I mean, and I understand the money. I feel like I wouldn't fault, and I wish there were a boxer that would say, I'm not going to do that because it kind of sullies my craft to, and of course it's naive to think, I bet you there are though star boxers that are like, nah, I don't want to be doing shit like that. Now you waive that money, who's going to say no?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the money is really, really good. Joshua made something like 50 million last night.
Say if the money were comparable though, right? Say if they had, it's like, well, I could make that same money in a legit fight. I bet you a lot of these dudes would be like, nah, fuck this.
Yeah, but it's to circle back around. It's a sideshow attraction,
which I hate. I mean, yes, boxing has not exactly been the most pure.
And the world of media has become boxing, and boxing has become the world of media.
Interesting.
It's all about sideshow attractions. It's all about trying to gain attention. There's a fantastic YouTube series called The Attention Economy. It's by a guy named Cyprian. Fantastic, interesting follow. He's a big Bitcoin guy. Shout out to Cyprian, formerly known as Vin Armani. He was actually on an old Showtime show called Gigolos. This guy has had a fascinating trajectory from gigolo to Bitcoin guy to now he is a Russian Orthodox dude who talks about Bitcoin. And he was one of the apparently has one of the first patents on an early social network because he was a web developer back in the day.
How old is he?
He's like he's somewhere between our age. I think he's probably 40 something.
Okay. What's that boxer's last name? Joshua?
Anthony Joshua.
Anthony Joshua.
Yeah.
I guess what he would say is, listen, we're all human clickbait now. You know, like
Wow.
we're all living clickbait now. And we have to play by those rules. That's what he or his team or whatever would say. Like you gotta be willing to be clickbait, which is unfortunate to me. I see that. I see him knocking. What's the other guy's name again?
Francis Ngannou.
Ngannou. Francis Ngannou. I see him knocking him out, and it's just like this guy hasn't had the opportunity to train in your sport. Like what are you doing? It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Like you might as well tie his fucking one arm behind his back and knock him out. It just seems. Now, to Jake Paul's credit, he's the one who should have who you would think has his arm tied behind his back, right? So he's saying, look, I know haven't been trained in this shit. I'll take you on anyway. Which, I mean, there's something to be said. I mean, look, the guy is. I'm not going to knock it all, right? You even if what you're getting attention for, even if I think it's gross, you still had to do a good job of getting attention. And he and his brother have certainly done that. They definitely have. What's that?
They've mastered it.
Right. They absolutely, without question, have some kind of savvy. But it's like it's dragging the conversation to a kind of vaudevillian place. Like, let's go see the bearded lady. Like that's what we're it's eroding at these other institutions. And to the rugby players playing football, yes, I was aware of that. They still have to train. You know what I mean? They still have to find a way to. You don't just fucking pick somebody off the street and go, all right, suit up. And they're not the main attraction. You're not going to put that guy in at fucking quarterback. You know, so
yet,
right.
But before we pivot, I would like to reiterate once more. They are a symptom, not a disease.
Well, listen, you're still not going to make out with somebody who has a giant herpes sore on their mouth because it's only the symptom and not the disease. It's kind of both.
On that note, you want to move over to your should I call it a mea culpa on Lex?
I mean, I was wrong when I said that he doesn't have the pitch arsenal or the tools to ask good questions. I went and I watched some of the Tucker clips and I was very impressed.
Should I queue up some of this?
Yeah. Now, do you have it in the spot where he talks about
I have it in a spot that you provided me.
Yeah, where Tucker's talking about like how clean the Moscow subway is and Moscow is as a whole. And I thought that Lex came in off the fucking top rope with a ninja question, but then it went wrong from there.
For those of you who don't know, Tucker, I'd be shocked if you don't, but Tucker Carlson went to Moscow. He interviewed President Vladimir Putin. And then he shot a couple very controversial videos about Moscow, about how clean it was. They went to the supermarket. One of the Moscow supermarkets, there's got to be a bunch of supermarkets in Moscow. It's a giant city. So, and we're going to hear a bit of it here.
Of our people, you don't need to put up with this. You don't need to put up with foreign invaders stealing from you, occupying your kids' school. Your kids can't get an education because people from foreign countries broke our laws and showed up here and they've taken over the school. That's not a feature of freedom, actually. That's the opposite. That's what enslavement looks like. And so I'm just saying, raise your expectations a little bit. You can have a clean, functional, safe country. Crime is totally optional. Crime is something our leaders decide to have or not have. It's not something that just appears organically. I wrote a book about crime 30 years ago. I've thought a lot about this. You have as much crime as you put up with, period. And it doesn't make you less free to not tolerate murder. In fact, it makes you unfree to have a lot of murders. And so but it makes me sad that people are like, well, I guess this is I can't live in New York City anymore because of inflation and filth and illegal aliens and people shooting each other. But, I'm glad because this is vibrant and strong and free. It's like, that's not freedom, actually, at all.
Your point is well taken. You can have both. But do you regret?
We had both. That's the point. I saw it.
Do you regret to a degree using the Moscow subway and the grocery store as a mechanism by which to make that point?
The real question that I thought was really admirable is further back, where he says, where he says, yes, you're right. We don't have to trade freedom for cleanliness, but dictators will often, right around there, dictators will often brag about how clean their cities are.
Okay, we can go back there.
Yeah.
So true that in dictatorships,
back up just maybe 10 seconds.
And I think with younger people, you can tell them that, and they're like, "Oh, 1985, you were, selling slaves in Madison Square Garden." It's like, no, they weren't. You're going to Madison Square Garden and not stepping over a single fentanyl addict.
It is true. There doesn't have to be a trade-off between cleanliness and freedom of speech. But it is also true that in dictatorships, cleanliness and architectural design is easier to achieve and perfect, and often is done so you can show off, look how great our cities are, while you're suppressing.
Of course.
What was amazing about that question?
I love that question so much. In fact, the next time I get to lead a workshop on interviewing, I'm gonna use this as an example. I think that is a fantastic rebuttal to what, or hey, well, listen, here's a little more perspective on what Tucker's doing. It completely fucking exposes every issue, my issue with Tucker. And it's funny we're talking about Jake Paul. To me, Tucker is like Don King or something. Tucker's like he is P.T. Barnum, like incarnate. He can't talk about issues honestly. He presents a bunch of amazing, salient facts and then constructs them in a way where he's got that fucking top hat thing and he's got to turn it into a performance and shift the context. And here, Lex brings him back like, yo, actually, here's a little fucking context to cut through the smoke and mirrors shit you're trying to pull. The only issue I have is he doesn't keep his foot on Tucker's throat. And let's watch what happens here. Tucker does that thing that all experienced people who've been on mic a lot can do. They just start talking about whatever the fuck they want. He just takes what he's asked and goes wherever he wants with it and does that little shuck and jive thing. But it's an awesome question.
I agree with that vehemently. This is not a defense of the Russian system at all. And if I felt that way, I would not only move there, but I would announce I was moving there. I'm not ashamed of my views. I never have been.
Go at him, Lex. Come on, dude.
Trying to impute secret motives to my words. I'm like the one person in America you don't need to do that with. If you think I'm a racist, ask me, and I'll tell you.
Oh,
Are you a racist?
Of course. No,
that was funny.
I am a sexist though.
Great.
See, this is where Lex maybe is the parallel to these fighters who aren't trained boxers. You get in the ring with this motherfucker, you better have your A game on, because he's gonna pull this shit that he just did on Lex, and Lex let him get away with it. It's like no. Don't swerve 4 lanes over to kind of skate out of what I just put in front of you, which is that you're intentionally misrepresenting the context of what you saw to spin people's feelings about the USA. Now Tucker has a point. Like, yeah, our cities are in fucking serious decay. And why is that? And we need to interrogate that. But Lex was onto him, and then he let him get away with it. So that's my spin. What are you hearing?
I thought it was a good question. This is why I disagreed with you when you brought the point up. Not strictly because of this. I think I've seen Lex make that kind of, counter punch often. I think he's just a different kind of interviewer, and that was the point that I made on our last engagement on this.
Well, that was the point he made.
Yeah, I was agreeing.
That's the point he made. Yeah, I think he's a little too. I think his critics are right that he's a little too passive. He mistakes being accommodating and letting people feel comfortable with being passive, because Tucker just, dude, he could have knocked Tucker out right here. Not that that's what you're trying to do in an interview, but he had him on he could have delivered the knockout punch, and then Tucker just Tucker rope-a-doped him.
Should we go deeper into Tucker, or should we move on?
No, but I just want to acknowledge, I got to watch more of Lex's shit. He started off with a really, really good question too, which I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember being really impressed.
We could hear his first question.
I don't know if it's in it's in the other clip.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it for now. We could always come back to Lex.
It'll be interesting to see where he develops, right? Like, he's created a space for himself. His podcast is successful. He has what I would consider to be A-list guests. I mean, in my world. And I'll be curious, because like you said, he doesn't need to do it. It's a passion project.
Yeah. And I wonder, because they actually spend a lot of time later in this interview talking about, because Lex has said for years how he has wanted to interview Putin even before this latest Ukraine encounter. And they spent a good amount of time talking about what to expect and with it. Also, Lex, who's I believe is from Ukraine, is a native Russian speaker. So they could have a full-on conversation. That was probably the most interesting element of that interview, was Tucker talking about the mechanics of interviewing someone who speaks a different language than you. And the fact that you had someone in your ear who is translating it. They're good translators, but they're not perfect, because nobody's perfect, because English and Russian don't line up perfect. No two languages really do. And plus there's a delay. And you're in a room with somebody and you're reacting to someone on a delay. So that's that was a really fascinating element of what Tucker laid out in his talk with Lex.
I would love to see Lex Fridman do that interview. I would hope that somebody could get to him and teach him some stronger punches. I do like I'm not going to call it a tactic, because I think it's just his personality. I think he could turn it into a tactic where you appear to be, I guess, somewhat passive, or like you're not on the offensive, and you let the person come to you and then start. Like, let them almost trap themselves. Not that you're always in an antagonistic posture with an interview subject, but with someone like Putin, you do have to challenge this person. Especially a world leader. They're going to expect some measure of deferring. but they do want to respect you. I think I've never interviewed a world leader, but I feel like somebody like that, they want you to go, oh, you're fucking clever, dude. Like, all right. Like, this is a bit of a chess match here. I don't think Lex has the killer instinct. Like, Tucker, to me, has the ego. Like, I would be nervous sitting in a room with Putin. I just would. There's like rock people, not so much. Like me, but I would just be nervous. I don't think Tucker's fucking nervous. I think Tucker has a sense of like, I'll sit with anybody and my ego's solid enough. I think Lex would be sort of an accommodating presence, and where Putin would say things that he has to push back on. So I feel like you and I have to get to Lex basically before we have to train him, get him on a athletic bag before he goes to interview Putin.
Well, also, I mean, I think training is an interesting point to go on there, in that Lex is new to this. Tucker has been working, if I remember correctly, he worked at newspapers, then magazines, then into TV, writing countless articles, and then going on the TV in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Leading up for about the 10 to 15 years before the Jon Stewart encounter. And then I think he had another 4 or 5 years on TV after that, then ran a news publication, a Daily Caller, and then went to Fox News, where he was for the last decade. Like, you're talking about one guy with reams and reams of experience.
Sure.
Not going to be nervous in any situation. And another guy who is, has this openly talked about on his show, that he's shy, and that he's learning on the job.
Well, and he also mistakes just having a chat with interviewing. And similarly to what we were talking about before, you can't get in the ring with someone who's trained their whole life, their whole career, and you're going to get your ass kicked. And he kind of did there. He kind of, like, in like 30 seconds, Tucker showed that he does that thing where he's like, oh, well, see, people say I'm a racist. And it's like, that had nothing to do with what the fuck you were just at. You're just being evasive. You're just like setting off fireworks, flashy, thick colors to deflect what you were just asked. He sensed he was being exposed. That's like, yeah, actually, I am misrepresenting the whole Moscow cleanliness thing to put a spin on it, to send my message. So I'm going to talk about racism and like,
I disagree with you on that one. I don't think he was necessarily purposely misrepresenting. I thought it was clumsy. I thought it wasn't precise. But I do think, as you mentioned earlier, it was sort of a critique of what has happened with American cities. And was it the best one? It seems like it was ham-fisted and just sort of, like impromptu. And also, I think that'll reflect in something we'll get in later. And one thing we've already talked about before, about creating a sideshow. And before, we talked about creating your own juggalo camp. And part of that is living in hyperbole, living the gimmick, making expanding something larger than it needs to be. And I think when you do that, and you go out and you get something like $15 million of investment money, and you create a thing, and you want going viral a few times, being the troll that will piss people off, is a way to do it. Now, is it a pure misrepresentation? I don't think it was, but I think an exaggeration for sure.
I think it was
I may be like pulling, there's a very thin line between those things. I totally concede that, but I'm not sure that was a purposeful thing.
Well, because I think Tucker may believe his own bullshit.
Without a doubt.
He might be getting drunk off the sauce. And this is the thing. This is how insidious this is. I'm even experiencing this at the tiny level that I'm even in public, expression on YouTube. I've noticed certain things pop on YouTube Shorts, and you're not even aware to the degree that you're subliminally going to those things. Like, you can make a conscious decision, oh, that's going to pop on YouTube Shorts, but it's already coloring unconsciously my decision making to
Sure.
pander to it. You
Sure.
create this character. I don't think it's just money. I think these people, I've been saying this to you for like over a decade at this point. These people lose the boundary of where the character ends and they, or where they begin and the character, or they end and the character begins. And he was doing that. Tucker, he's doing like a typical Tucker guitar solo on there, right? He's like the same notes of same techniques. And that exposed why Tucker Carlson, I think, is not a good faith communicator. He's dishonest. You're right. I think exaggerating is a better way to put it. He was contextual. He was framing. That's the word.
Before we move on, I just want to say shout out to our listeners on X. You guys are staying with us pretty strong, so that's pretty cool. Thank you for being with us. You want to get into Medhi Hasan?
Sure. Someone I have like zero thoughts on. So
Yeah.
this will be interesting.
I have zero thoughts on him too, and this is what he's representing, not who he is. I'm not a giant fan of the band. I didn't really like his show. I didn't really like him as a guest. I'm gonna show you his image here on YouTube and tell me if you recognize him. Do you recognize him at all?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. And I can hear his voice just when I see his name.
For those who are listening, Medhi Hasan was an MSNBC host until last fall, where MSNBC decided to move on. He was one of the people who went really hard after the Gaza Israel thing, and I think that was probably why. That MSNBC has not said that, or NBC News has not said that's why they moved on. They said they
Of course
just
they won't.
made a creative choice. He's hinted at it, but not totally admitted that that was it. Crystal and her annoying husband, Kyle, interviewed him, and he sort of sidestepped it, kind of in a way. We were talking about the experience of Tucker. It's a very Tucker-ish way, because when Tucker's been asked about him leaving Fox News, he gave a similar answer where it was like, well, I don't really know, but I kind of know.
Well, don't these people sign NDAs? Can't we expect that that's probably what?
Some do, some do not. It also depends on how much Hasan is being paid out. How much longer is his contract going on? Because after, I don't think it's from what I understand, they're non-disparagement agreements while they're being paid. Because you hear a lot of people after their contract come out, they go and put their hair down.
Right. So okay. So it's not like you're going to get a civil suit for violating a non-disclosure agreement.
Probably
it's more
not.
like we're not just you fuck up the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Yeah.
So just a bit of this story, I think will help set me up on my little tirade I'm about to go on. Medhi Hasan is launching a new digital media company. The media company has a terrible name. It's called Zeto, which means to seek out. It bills itself as having a strong bias for the truth and an unwavering belief in the media's responsibility to the public, whatever that means.
If you worked at MSNBC, sorry, you can't be.
That's gobbledygook, because truth is a weird one. You you can. I mean, facts would be more up my alley, but even facts can be like presented in one way so that so the reality of what is said is different, or what was done is different. It happens all the time. But okay. He wrote that it will offer unfiltered news, irony of ironies, bold opinions. I no doubt that'll happen. His site offers free access to some newsletters, podcasts with an $8 a month or $72 per year to access all. Okay. Why Medhi Hasan? And he inspired the title of this program. This is how to not make money in news. Exactly that. That's his and if I were to put a bow on my feelings about this idea, not because I would love to run a news site. I may run a news site at some point. But if you don't want to make money in news, you start a news site. It's the truth. And we at the same time, in recent memory, we just got a peek behind a curtain in a way that we usually don't. From Talking Points Memo. It was via a tweet from Derek Thompson. Shout out to Derek Thompson. He's a tech writer for The Atlantic. And he has a great podcast called Plain English. If you're not listening to it, you should. It's a very interesting approach to news. He usually goes in depth on a subject, brings in some people and talks it through. Whether you agree with him or not, I mean, it's well worth listening to. I listen to it every week. But he highlighted a email that the editor-in-chief of Talking Points Memo put out to his subscribers about programmatic advertising. And when I say programmatic advertising, we're talking about advertising that's based on the amount of page views you get.
I was going to ask you what that means. Yeah, so to define that.
Yeah. So, okay. Usually, I think and this is a rough number. It's not exact, so don't take it as gospel. But what usually happens is you are 1,000 people see your site, and you make $10 off the ads that you see on the side of your site. Whether they're Google based or there's other ad networks as well, where you have cut a deal where they can go and project ads on the side of your content. Brands usually also go out and they seek out, whether it's title sponsors, they'll drop down ads. There's other types of programmatic ads, but ads that essentially just appear on the site as you go. This was the backbone of the last generation of media companies. This is why this graph that's on the screen, if you're watching us on YouTube or BitChute, shout out to BitChute. I've heard from a lot of people on BitChute recently, so shout out to y'all. The graph that we're seeing on this screen that I'll walk us through is why media company after media company after media company right now and over the last couple of years have had to downsize because programmatic advertising has not been all they thought it would be. Go ahead.
It looks, according to this graph, well, it looks like Medhi didn't get the Talking Points memo, but Medhi didn't get the memo, but I mean, it looks like it's contracted to like a terrifying degree.
I have a compromised immune system, but I'm still only 21. But I'm not even worried because I just take supplements and like I self-medicate, so it's fine.
What is that from?
It was a news clip. I didn't mean to press that one, but I love that one.
No, I mean, it looks like it's contracted like this should have everybody shaking in their boots.
Yes, it's a 95% decline since 2016. So those ads that I was describing a couple minutes ago, generated $1.6 million in revenue. Now, Talking Points Memo has had a subscription base as well at the same time. So, and most of these outlets have a mix of the two. They've always had a mix of the two. Some went pure free. I think like Huffington Post went purely free. BuzzFeed was purely free. Vice.com was purely free. But a lot of places like Talking Points Memo, which was a little bit smaller, had a mix of their subscriber base and programmatic ads. So in 2016, they made $1.6 million off their advertising. 2017, they made $1.2 million. They made just a little over $1 million in 2018. Then it dropped to $600,000 in 2019. COVID hits, it drops down to just under $500,000. Then in 2021, it drops down to $200,000.
Just over $250,000, yeah.
Just over a quarter. No, just under a quarter.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it's $109,000 in 2022. And last year, it was just $75,000.
Wow. I mean, that's not even enough to pay someone's salary there.
You would think at a place like Talking Points Memo, I would think it'd probably be a low-end staffer. So, doing what Medhi Hasan has decided to do doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you see stuff like this. But it seems to be the trend. And shout out to Sarah Fisher and Axios Media Trends because I think by accident they laid out this very, very well. Because I don't think they intended this.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
Why wouldn't he be encouraged? Like, who is encouraging him to go for the subscription model? Why wouldn't he be encouraged to just license his content to one of the like well-known streaming services like Spotify or Audible even? Like, why wouldn't he approach a platform like that to just pay him to do his thing?
Upside would be one thing. You get the upside of however you turn around here. Number two, programmatic ads, same problem hits when it comes to podcasting and it comes to licensing out your content. Most of those are programmatic. Not all of them, because you might have a sales force behind you.
I was going to say,
if you do, I think a place like The Ringer is a great example of this, where they clearly have a sales team going out and getting advertisers for them. Most major radio personalities and podcasters do. So they could simply do that. And I have no doubt that they probably will. Because they are aware of this. But that's that's a really good question.
But you're still saying he's jumping on a sinking ship, basically.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. So just moving into this a little bit more. So what he's doing is actually the popular thing. And to bring that back Tucker up again, it's what Tucker Carlson did. It's what Don Lemon's doing. It's what Megyn Kelly did. It's what Bill O'Reilly is doing and what Katie Couric is doing. And I think that's another piece of this puzzle. He sees himself as an equal to them.
I was gonna say, is he as big? Oh, how much of a draw is he compared to the right?
He's not in the tier of a Don Lemon. As strange as that sounds, and I don't think Don Lemon's as big a star as CNN paid him, clearly, because they paid him something. They're paying him out, I believe, close to $30 million.
Man, good work if you can get it. Jeez.
But he's not in that tier. He certainly isn't in the Katie Couric tier. Or Bill O'Reilly or Kelly or Carlson. I mean, all of those people are way more steps beyond Medhi Hasan.
Well, and also aren't they also more polemical, all of them? That he's not. From what I understand of his thing, it's not quite as incendiary, right? As
It's it. I would disagree with
okay.
that.
I don't know. I don't know his
I
shtick
think
enough.
a lot of that depends on your perspective.
I guess what I would say is he's not as good at he's not as he's not as good at being flashy and explosive doing that kind of thing as they are. That's why he's not as big of a draw, because he's a little more unremarkable version of he's like it seems like generic sort of plug and play talking head into the MSNBC ethos, as opposed to these other people are legit brands on their
Sure.
own.
In the MSNBC world, Rachel Maddow could have easily done this.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that Keith Olbermann didn't do this is kind of criminal. Like it's one of the dumbest moves of his career. He should have done this years and years and years ago, but he didn't. Now he's just sort of like regurgitating his old countdown show on podcast now,
Mhm,
and then
mhm.
tweeting about dogs and how Republicans are ruining the country. But if he had more of a business sense, he would have did this, because he had the stature that you're describing from that MSNBC world. I'd say Chris Hayes probably has it. I know Joe Scarborough would. I don't think he could. I don't think he could, but I don't think he would.
Mm.
I'll take other people in their world. Maybe a guy like Luke Russell, a guy like maybe Alex Wagner at this point. She's become one of their poster children. But Medhi Hasan, even when he was there, he was like a second. He was in the second. He was a background player.
Mhm.
He wasn't a star.
Right. He's not at the top of the he's the undercard guy,
Sure.
to go back to boxing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how well that fits, right?
Mhm.
So this is one way that media companies are trying to, the new media companies are forming. They're building around a fallen star. So if you go, you make your bones somewhere, and then you drop out of there, and then you find an investor or investors, and you build something around yourself. Now, there's a long-term problem with this approach. And this is where Hasan is doing a smart thing, because Hasan isn't just building himself. If you look at Bill O'Reilly, he's building himself. Megyn Kelly's building himself. Tucker Carlson's building himself. Don
He's
Lemon
building
himself.
he's building this as a network of
Yes.
shows. Yeah.
He's bringing in other people with him, which is the smart way to move. Glenn Beck has done this. If you go and watch The Blaze isn't just Glenn Beck.
Mhm.
The Blaze is Jason Whitlock. The Blaze is Sarah Gonzalez is one. I'm trying to think who else is on there. The guys from the duck hunting guys, the duck hunting dudes have a show. Like there's a bunch of dudes. Chad Prather is another one. There's a bunch of guys that are there's a extended universe of Glenn Beck.
The Blaze is a brand that has transcended Glenn Beck in a way. It's beyond him.
Yes,
He's the face of it.
Oh, yeah, he's the center spoke, but he's not. It's more than him.
Right, and when you even say the Blaze, you might see he's the face, but it's you think of it as more than him. So I do think you're right that Hasan is astute to be trying to build that. The problem is, can he carry it? And who are the people that he's bringing? Also,
that's definitely a good point.
Also, paying $8 a month in a media landscape where there's so much available already, you really have to like this guy or what he's building, right? I mean, you can pay that much $5 or $6 a month for a Substack podcast that you really, really enjoy. So it's not that much more, but it's like, what is his hook that's going to get his people to shell out that much per year?
Yeah, I think that's why I was sort of slagging on his description of his company, because none of it was kind of remarkable,
Nope.
and none of it seemed like it fed a part of the marketplace that isn't being fed. Whether you
Mhm.
like or hate the Daily Wire or the Blaze, they are serving underserved populations. Whether I like the root or not, I always beat up on the root on the show. It seems I always bring it up. Hate the show, hate the root. Root is terrible, but
Likewise, I agree.
it's serving an underserved population.
Hmm.
Medhi Hasan isn't. You say what you will about a place like Fox News, it's singular. There are smaller networks like OAN and what's the other one? Newsmax, that try to chip away at it, but we're talking a small universe of conservative news outlets. When the playground that Medhi Hasan, based on watching him on MSNBC, seeing his clips, seeing him being interviewed, is playing in, that pond is way bigger.
I was going to say also, couldn't you replace him with someone else from MSNBC, and his whole thing is not that different? I mean, other than his name and his look, right? Like he's somewhat more generic, to
Agreed.
my impression, right? So like he's not enough. What I think he should lean into the Keith Olbermann, go completely apeshit or batshit, excuse me, go completely fucking crazy and start saying insane things, and I bet you he'd get more subscribers.
Yeah, I probably. I think here's why I think he won't. I think he is a believer that in his own, once again, he believes in his own gimmick. He thinks that people are turning to him because he is Mr. News Guy delivering the truth, not
And
because of his shtick.
wow, man, that is some fucking next level delusion right there.
But I think that's from every interview I've seen with him, that's what I take away. He does, even a Bill O'Reilly back in the day. There was on some level, there was a belief that I am an entertainer.
Mm,
Rush Limbaugh would say that openly. He
mm.
said it openly many, many times. I'm an entertainer. Whether they're talking about deep politics or not, that's what they would say. Whether they actually believed it or not, that's what they would say. Medhi Hasan, I don't get that vibe from at all. I get the vibe of I'm Edward R. Murrow.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I know. I mean, why couldn't he lean into the South Asian thing and try to cater to that audience?
He might be. Maybe that's why it's called Z2. You know, but he has not said that as of now. That would be a smart way, you know, and as I sort of figure out the whole media endeavor space for myself, and I know you're on a similar journey. Part of it is niching down and figuring out how to explain succinctly to the pool of people that you want to reach what you're trying to do. And that's why his pitch is kind of blah, you know?
I'm really surprised he doesn't have access to better people to help him with that pitch.
I would hope.
I'm very disappointed, actually, that someone like that, with that much resources, you would think,
yeah,
couldn't get a better marketing brain behind this. And because right off the bat, he's like handicapping himself with that wording. That
Sure.
says nothing. I mean, it's basically like I'm generic brand X. Like,
yeah. So that's the Medhi Hasan model that he's following is one way that media companies are going about it. Here's another way. Super serve your fans. Throw events. Axios has been doing this heavily. CNBC has done this for a long time. Now, the other parts of MSNBC and NBC News are doing this as well. They are just leaning into their super fans. If you love Rachel Maddow to death, you want to go party with Rachel Maddow and Luke Russert and all of them. So they are charging something over $100 just for a ticket to go hang out with them. All right. And this has been big business.
It's kind of like the Rock meet and greet, sort of, but I think that's maybe a little bit different in that meet and greets are pretty quick and they shuffle you out of there. You're like, I think this model is also, you see this on the independent podcaster realm too, where they do like Zoom calls and like physical get-togethers, and it's like people are starting to pick up the scent that your audience wants to be in your Juggalo camp.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to Sarah Hepela and Nancy Rommelman. They do that as well. I've attended one of those. What else have I attended? I have not joined Buck Johnson. Shout out to Buck Johnson. I have not joined his, but I would like to, because his guests seem interesting. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It's like on my daily commentary show, I've been talking a lot about loneliness and the different ways that people are looking to make friends. And there was this comment that I got on BitChute about it. It was this woman who said that she's 60 and she moved to Alabama. And she got there and everybody who was around her age was retired. And she said, "Hey, I don't have any friends." This was just a straight up comment on my piece. And I was like, "Hey, yeah, I hope you get out and meet people, all that kind of thing." And I think this is a really smart approach here. It's if you are watching the Today Show and Today Show like content heavily, you probably have a lot of in common with people who do that. Therefore, why not set up events in places to where you could hang out with these people? Tim Pool announced something similar recently with his group. They're having a physical places. And I believe multiple are playing around the country where you could get a fob and you could go hang out with other Tim Pool fans.
Right. So what I like about this, or obviously of Jason Whitlock's Fearless Army, but what I like about this is
another great example of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he's even a little bit ahead of the curve. Like he's taking it to he's creating a sense of like, okay, we're on this ideological crusade together and we're brothers in arms.
Give our fans a bit more of a outline of the Fearless Army.
Well, it's very, he sees it as a necessary response to the to American society going off course. So he wants people who are rooted in his biblical Christian pro-life worldview to then, I mean, I guess he's selling it as they are going to somehow, by coming together, they're going to just by default be a bulwark against what they see as intrusions and shortcomings of American culture more broadly. I wonder, though, whether how much he's actually going to organize those people and take any kind of initiative or action versus just giving them the impression that, hey, just being in a room with me, you're doing something. I wonder. I'm not sure one way or the other, but it's like, well, what are you actually trying to do versus just selling the idea of that?
Yeah, I think I want to let Jason explain some of this himself, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Let me switch to because I pulled up his and I shout out to whoever put together this on his team, because I thought this was actually really kind of captivating when it premiered last year.
Right. I tried to get an assignment to interview him about this.
Secular world.
You try to get an assignment to interview him?
Yeah, I used to write for Nashville Scene,
Mhm.
their weekly alternative news weekly, and I was like, "Yo, like, let me do a feature on him," and they didn't go for it.
I believe and honestly, because I think they're doing another roll call. I think we should contact them and just go.
I agree. I
I
agree.
think it because this whole concept is fascinating.
Atheist, the secular world, the culture uses our imperfection, our sins to shut up. You can't stand on truth. And if all it was imperfection, it eliminated us from standing on truth, this would be a very quiet place. I'm trying to be as loud as I can and as transparent as I can to try to inspire other men. We know you're imperfect. You know you're imperfect. God's grace and mercy gives you the right to stand on his truth and to speak that loudly into the culture. We have to do that.
You can look around and say, these guys have taken over everything. They own the CDC, the NIH, they got the president. Is transgender surgery for children? Colleges today are nothing but leftist indoctrination centers working fully against the Bible. What's the alternative? So you're going to stop fighting today and you're going to let the government raise your kids? And you're going to turn around and let them chop off your 12-year-old daughter's breasts and let them sterilize your son and tell him that he's a girl? And you're going to let them make the Bible hate speech? You're the last line of defense here because nobody else is going to do it. And God's going to walk with you. This is literally worth dying for. I'm telling you. So it's like everybody, it's a nice little metaphor. This is it. If there's a hill to die on, this is it.
The Overton window has been moved right in front of our children's bedroom. And there are all types of people that are trying to climb up in the ladder. And every good father should be on his post so that when they peek their head up over the window sill, you kick the ladder back down, let them know you move on to the other house because we're not playing that around here.
Sometimes just standing up, just saying, no, we're not going to do that. Not my marriage, not my kids, not my family, not my community, not my church, not my city. Just declaring that, that's victory enough. In prepping his disciples, he tells Peter, he's like, listen, Satan desires to sift you as wheat, but I've prayed for you. We're going to face some ups and downs in life, and we're not going to always get it together. But if we stay on the path, if we stay chasing after, running after Jesus, running after his way, he's even praying for us. Now, I like it when you pray for me, Jason and TJ. I appreciate that, but to have Jesus pray for me, that makes me feel pretty good. When you make it through this sifting process, go back and strengthen your brothers. So we all have a responsibility as men. Once he's delivered me through this, I have a responsibility to go back and bring some other folk out.
You do a roll call to just let people know you're not alone. Be confident in your positions, and we're going to inspire you. We're going to eat, fellowship, listen to some music. It's going to be the first of many roll calls that we do. So we're looking for soldiers. We're going to put on our best recruiting pitches for soldiers.
All right. I have a few things I want to go into about this.
I saw you smirking the whole time. I wish that was bigger for the audience because I saw, yeah.
All right. Look, on one level, look, I appreciate creating a space for men to get together and bond in fellowship and have a moment where you're all together and with people who have a similar perspective as you do. On the other hand, this screamed like a sales pitch to join my Juggalo camp. To join you, not just join my Juggalo camp. You're gonna pay me a chunk of money. You're gonna commit a huge chunk of your life. You're gonna go. You're gonna fly or drive down to Nashville, and we're gonna essentially, indoctrination strong, because if you're gonna make that kind of trip, you're probably already totally all in.
Right. They're not indoctrinating. They're just trading what they already feel in simpatico with one another.
Yeah. And this is where it relates to the other parts that we were just talking about, in terms of the Today Show, MSNBC, CNBC. It's in one way it is very, very smart. You are niching down your audience. You're saying, hey, I am for this specific group of people. This is who I'm talking to. This is who, and there's enough of these people who are willing to spend a lot of money. Yeah, I think it was it $100 a ticket, and something like plus more for a hotel and all this stuff. There's this whole VIP package as well, if I remember correctly. Like to spend close up time with me, to shake my hand.
Well, it's more like a meet and greet. To spend, how many minutes do you get to before you?
Well, precisely. That's what all of these are.
Sure.
And it goes back to the conversation we were having about programmatic advertising. If you could just make your money by having a large audience, and Fearless has a relatively large audience, not a giant audience, but a relatively large audience. My guess is he does pretty well. Based on what we can see on YouTube, he does well enough. It's not gigantic, but it's well enough. But it's not enough, because the relying on advertisers, even if it is Good Ranchers and Preborn and all his advertisers, it's not generating the kind of revenue that a media company of this size 10 years ago could have. And therefore you have to pivot, and that's an example of pivoting.
Right. Yeah, I mean, something about it struck me as really dishonest, because number one, he's got a track record for not being able to hold teams together.
Well, he lost one big member of his team. What's his face? Royce White. Right?
Royce White, and we'll probably lose more of those. Of those, I mean, you and I could place bets on how many of those three dudes.
Yeah.
Delano, like when he loses Delano, I think he will torpedo his own ship.
Well, and I think Delano, I mean, I am bullish. If I were to, and I would love to do an episode that's just this, where we place prop bets on we pick 10 people who we think are going to be superstars in the years to come. I think Delano has that kind of talent. And that kind of brain, where I think I could see that dude becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger figure over time.
And what the implication is that he'll outgrow.
I think he's already getting there.
Yeah.
I think Royce already
right.
got
And Whitlock, like a lot of these dudes, doesn't seem to respond well when that happens. Also, this idea that, we're on a crusade that's worth dying for. Okay, because you're going to a Nashville venue. What are those dudes going to do afterwards? Walking out of there, I mean, are you really fighting this fight for God and country and spiritual warfare? That it's basically like because I bet you there's tiers to it. And here's the thing. I think this idea is fantastic if the audience can go into it with the expectation that they're mostly going to get to interact with other audience members, not so much with you. If the audience can understand you are the vehicle where they're going to interact with each other, that's cool. Honestly, it feels yucky to me to think that you're being conscripted into someone's social group. I wouldn't even want to go to a retreat by any of my favorite podcasts, or maybe like a I don't know, maybe like a music event or arts event or something, maybe, but that just feels icky to me. I like talking to these people online. If it's like being in the room with somebody as this celebrity type figure, all of a sudden podcast hosts are now mini cult leaders.
Hmm. Sure.
That's uncomfortable.
But that's the way it's always been. I mean, you go back to Father Conklin, who was a radio star in the during the Depression in World War II. I mean, if you go back to if you look at newspaper columnists back in the day, if you look at you go back to guys who were poets and singers who would travel the world and perform in front of people. It is about creating a cult following and having people be willing to spend money on you.
But
Yeah,
how,
the difference here is that he is stretching it to the extreme. He
what,
is saying that, hey, following me and what I'm feeding you is worth dying for.
I know.
But it is something that is reflective of something that has happened as long as we've had mass media.
But wait a minute, how much were those people actually interacting with the audience?
Not. Well, this is where we get to the Jake Paul piece here, right? It's a reflective of the times. We are able to connect in a way that we weren't able to connect before. The people who are watching us right now are able to connect with us in new ways and in a more direct way than they were in previous eras. So that's the difference. We are in a different era, but it's the same. If you are swimming and the current is going with you, you're able to move at a different pace than if you were going against the current.
Yeah, and the audience wants to hang out.
Yeah.
Like if you get to a point where you have an audience online, they want to hang out with you. These parasocial relationships.
Mhm.
I'll share an anecdote from the other night. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, and they did a live stream. And I left. They didn't even have that many people. I thought it was way fewer people in the YouTube ticker than I expected. I thought there'd be like hundreds of people and it'd be going fast, And I left a comment and I was very disappointed. First, my heart started beating really fast, like nervous that they would actually read it. And then I went to bed feeling shitty that somehow my 2 cents didn't register in the conversation. I'm like, yo, I got to rethink what I'm expecting here.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I was like, oh, I would never go to one of their events and try to be that person that's like, oh, can you pay attention to me? Like, it just feels so gross. But I wanted recognition. And this is what all these audiences are after. And as people both consuming the content and creating it, we have to think about what that entails and try to be as conscientious as possible. Because, I mean, once a podcasters are the new rock stars, I think. And once they get to a certain level, they don't have the energy to really give you full attention. So you got to be like, well, I'm going to talk to other people hanging out in the group chat, But I mean, that really told me something. I was like, man, I feel really bummed out that I wasn't noticed by these people. And I'm like, I better rein that in.
I would like to give you the final version, and I think the classic version of how these media companies are making money. They're obviously there are other ways, but these are the 3 chunks that I wanted to highlight. It's another way. I'd call this, the classic way. Get bought or built by someone or something that actually makes money.
Yeah.
Complex was bought by an e-commerce startup. Complex at one point was valued north of $1 billion. It was bought for 1.8. Not 1.8, what 108 million. And what they're going to try to do is basically fire all the expensive people. They're going to spin off First We Feast and the Hot Wings guy. And they're going to hire a bunch of new, young, cheap people to create content, and so they can sell more stuff to people as part of this e-commerce startup. And the other example on this slide is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has invested in journalists. They're hiring journalists left and right to write the blurbs that you see on LinkedIn. And that is all enabled by Microsoft making crazy amounts of money, buying LinkedIn and saying, hey, we want some homegrown journalism. So LinkedIn said, all right, we can hire 1,000 journalists if we want, because Microsoft has an infinite pool of money to invest in it. So, and this is this perspective is honestly as old as broadcasting in newspapers have been. Procter & Gamble made TV and radio. ABC is owned by Comcast now. Comcast makes its money on cable and internet. GE owned NBC for nearly 30 years. GE is not a TV. They're not a media company. They just bought it because they could have the cheap advertising. Newspapers were owned by newspaper barons, usually people who either own the products that newspapers needed, like paper, or some philanthropists. This is not a new model. People freak out about Jeff Bezos owning the Washington Post. No, what he's doing is what people did in previous generations. You get rich, and then you say, "Hey, I want to buy a newspaper as part of a vanity project," because that's essentially what these guys do, and it's been happening for 100 years.
Or you're saying that even some newspaper barons were doing it. The newspaper was just like an incidental vehicle for the real commerce that was going on.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's what's happening now, all over the place.
Yeah, well, selling our data, right? Like,
yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, and also just the influence. Like if you're Jeff Bezos, you're the king of Washington. You're one of the kings of Washington. You. Not just being, a billionaire, not just being one of the founder of one of the biggest companies in the world. You're in on the conversation. Your newspaper helps control the conversation in America.
Well, and it reminds me of when like people would go on like old time radio shows and perform live. It was really an excuse just to sell the product they were advertising.
Sure.
That's the only reason you're there.
Sure.
And soap operas.
Yes.
Were funded by soap manufacturers, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a really good way of looking at this, because then it reminds us, okay, this has been a mirage. The media is basically a front company.
Yes. And it always has been.
So if you approach it that way, then your perspective is you're a little more grounded in like your expectations.
I without a doubt. I mean, that's the way I've looked at things for my entire career. These are not altruistic institutions, and working in them confirm that. Like, they have a perspective. They have a perspective that grounds everything they do. It's not necessarily a negative thing, because in their perspective, they don't think what they're doing is negative. They are simply, they say, hey, this we are reporting from this perspective. And after a while, as we've discussed before, you don't even know you're doing it. You are just sort of like, you know that you have a boss or bosses and editors that you have to report to, and they are going, what they And do you want to spend your days fighting those people, or do you want to go along with the current? See, me being me, it's a little bit of both because I'm me. But most people, they hire looking for people who will fit in.
Mhm.
And if they don't, I just think of my process of being hired at USA Today. So in the process of what I saw at other places as well, where cultural fit was everything. They want your perspective without asking you directly your perspective.
Mm.
They'll ask you what you feel about whether it was diversity, equity, and inclusion is one example, or what you feel about news gathering. They'll ask you about your approach, and they'll ask you that they're trying to fill out, like, not just whether you have the bona fides to do what you're being asked to do, but whether your perspective on those things vary too wildly from their perspective.
Well, and I would imagine whether you can just be a vector for their perspective without even knowing that you're doing it.
I'd say that's probably true. I think that they the last thing that they're hoping for is you doing something that's embarrassing to them, or doing something that doesn't quite fit in their world.
Mm.
So I think that they're very careful about who they allow in those quarters. And when you get in, it's kind of like a blessing that this person, we're taking a chance, but they want to minimize the chance that they're taking.
Mm.
It's just as I think through that answer.
One thing that just going back to the Whitlock clip real quick
Mhm.
made me think, like, man, Medhi's got to hire his marketing team. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
because that was from a marketing perspective, it's like, damn, holy shit.
Yeah. I got to give them credit. They nailed it.
Yeah, even his theme song, I think, is so well done, and then like
Mhm.
that weird percussion off time,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
effect that's in there, like at a weird angle. It's like, wow, this is great.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him about how he is constructing his audience. And my guess is, like, his initial answer would be like, I'm just telling my truth.
Mhm.
But like, what you see in that show, in his approach, even to that theme you're talking about, is it all seems purposeful. It all seems like, hey, look, I want to create a space for people to communicate in from a perspective that I don't see out there.
Yeah, he has pivoted in his whole life outlook before.
Mhm.
I wonder whether there isn't another one eventually. Like, he's pretty dug in on this, and the
Yeah.
more successful he gets, he's going to have to commit to it.
Unless he has, well, I don't know about that.
Right, because he
Think
does
about
just
it.
blow.
Because he was pretty successful on Fox Sports 1. And I think that the odds are pretty strong that he'd still be there now.
Yeah, well, they wanted him to stay there.
And I think he'd still be very good at it.
Right, and he's blown things up before. I mean,
Of course. The Grantland
so
Affair being one, his first go around at ESPN.
sure.
Prior to that, yeah, for sure.
So I wonder. Seriously, I've been saying this. He's gonna make for a fascinating biography.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
someday. But I just wonder what his next thing, because he's leaning into the Bible really hard, really strong, because it's the thing that keeps him from the excessive behaviors he's talked about.
Mhm.
The promiscuity and drinking and gambling and all that stuff. And it's like, well, how long is that going to last before your habits find some other way of bringing you down?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be an interesting challenge with him to see if he can actually keep it, keep on his path.
Right. And I mean, he's clearly has trouble maintaining business relationship or working relationships without friction. So that's also going to be
And I think that's kind of why his setup with the Blaze works, because from what I understand about how those works, they treat individual shows as individual businesses.
yeah, like a friend, like a you are your own
Franchise.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And he is the king of his hill. There are limits clearly, and we with the Royce Wright affair, there he hit a few, and that was he felt like he was going to hit a few, but he is sort of, you're set up in his little fiefdom in Tennessee, and we'll see how long it lasts.
Hey, where do we sign for something
Yeah,
like
that'd be
that?
interesting.
It's,
Yeah.
it's like a dream gig,
Before we go, I'd like to hit on a guy that we've talked about a lot, who's making some crazy claims, um, uh, about an episode of his show that happened a couple months ago now, or was it a month ago now? Uh, Shannon Sharp.
Mm.
Now, I'd like to look at his data here because I find his data really interesting. All right. 61 million people watched his interview with Cat Williams on Club Shay Shay. That's impressive. That's a really high number, especially for a YouTube channel that's got under 2 million subscribers. That's crazy.
I think it was even under 1 million before this. I think. Don't quote me on that, though.
It's one of the numbers in here. Let me blow this up if I can. Well, actually, that did the opposite. There we go. It's getting bigger. All right. So, he says that my bad. He's just under 3 million. And he claims that since this episode, he gained 1.4 million subscribers, which is amazing. He says 110,000 watched the premiere episode live, which is not mind-blowing. It's very good. Very good. Like, I've seen bigger on YouTube. But very, very good. He gained a bunch of IG followers, a bunch of followers on X. But that's not the interesting numbers here. The interesting numbers are these numbers I'm circling here. 320 million views across all Club Shay Shay social channels. So I want, and I'll go back to the big camera for this because I think this is something, whenever I see something like this, I need to point this out. A view on social media, in most cases, it's 3 seconds.
Hmm.
So when you're talking about a view on YouTube, you're talking about 3 seconds. A view on Instagram, a view on X, a view on Facebook, about 3 seconds or less in some cases. So 320 million views is a nonsense number. He's speaking it as if it is something mind-blowing, when it's essentially just something passive. Any response before I go to the other number?
Well, I was concerned when I saw that IG post because the feeling I got was be careful this isn't flash in the pan. Now obviously his podcast is on the rise. It's doing extremely well, but there's something about, hey, you know what? We did so well off this one interview rather than just kind of sitting back and saying, no, we're kicking ass overall. Like why bring the attention back to that one interview? It's like hanging your hat on something that may be somewhat fleeting.
It no doubt it will be. I mean, look, Rogan's top interview, I believe, was something like 40 million. And I think it was Elon Musk. I mean, on YouTube, he hasn't topped that. You know, and we're talking the top dog. You know, Mr. Beast has gotten to 100 million a couple times. But I think his top is close to 200. Is he going to get there regularly? Not a chance. Those are your tippy top. I think you make it very valid points there. I think it's vanity. And I wanted to show off some of that vanity to you.
Well, yes, I think he would have been better off just putting the numbers up and not pinning it to that one interview. Because what if we get to the end of this year and that still ends up being his number one?
Oh, it will.
It's not going to look very good.
It will be, and I think his goal is that essentially, if people will just not pay attention to it at that point, they'll just look at the high point. They won't provide any analysis. Crap! This link is broken. This link isn't working. I can't get an X link working on here. Okay, I will not go there then. But yeah. So he was bragging about it with Chad Ochocinco, saying that he got his check. He made 3 times what he made during his pro career off this one interview. I don't believe that.
Whoa.
I don't believe that. But that's what he said. That was his claim.
Still,
and let me look up his number.
See, I don't. The thing is, his brand is not boastfulness either, right? So that's not really his thing to do that. He tends to be much more dignified in the things he says. It kind of reminds me of, it's almost like he's turning into a child star in a way, because he's in a new lane now. No, he's done this. He was an athlete. Then he did the broadcasting thing, kicked ass at both of those things. But now he's in a completely new. So it's almost like he's getting sudden fame all over again. And I don't know that you want to be bragging about those things, because we don't know how he's going to maintain this. And he's not prepared for maintaining it.
He won't. It is not just because of that. I mean, most people don't. They have their moment and they recede to the background, and they go back to their mean. The mean grows. But, you know, Peter Zion's a great example of this. If he's a geopolitical star, he had this giant balloon happen with the whole Russian invasion, right? And over the year that followed. And he's kind of receded a little. It's his base is higher because people stuck with him. They liked him. But he's not hitting that height until there's another thing that brings him back up again. Like it's not something, you can't expect this level of consistency.
It's like having a number one hit, basically.
Yeah, precisely. It's exactly like that. You're not like I think of if you have created a massive hit, I think of something like Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, makes all kinds of money. So suppose a former Infatuation Junkie was a massive hit album. I love the album. Massive hit. but it was Jagged Little Pill.
Right. It was a failure in comparison.
And it shouldn't have been a failure.
No.
It was. I thought it was a multi-platinum seller, if I remember correctly.
We can look this up.
It just was. It just was not on the same tier as Jagged.
Well, there's almost no way for it in music. You know already when you have a hit that big, you know for the most part it. You know, unless you're the rare people that can sustain it, you almost know it's downhill from there.
And I agree with you. I mean, I think that's exactly what happened.
And so what I'm concerned with these guys is that they don't see that coming. It doesn't sound like it.
So I have Shannon's earnings for his career.
Okay.
I'll share that.
JB is about to officially call bullshit here.
So this is according to Spot Rack. Shout out to Spot Rack. He's based out of Buffalo, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
He made $22 million across his career. You chop that in half, or about 60%. So he probably walked away with $12 million from his playing career. And he said he made 3 or 4 times that from this one interview.
Right. So he's saying he's made $66 million basically, or whatever, or 40, 36, somewhere between 36 and
that's crap. He's lying. Well, Shannon, why are you lying? There's no reason to lie. You've won. There's no reason to lie. You didn't make 30 million off of this interview.
Or even more. He's depending how he's counting it.
Unless you forgot what you made in the 90s and 2000s. You're lying. Stop lying.
So is this your Corey Holcomb moment where instead of Stephen A. Smith, you're capping, instead of that it's Shannon Sharp, you're capping?
Shannon Sharp, you're capping. Shannon Sharp is capping.
No, I don't know enough to claim. I'm not going to claim he's lying. I'll leave that on you. But
the man said 3 or 4 times what he meant as a player. I could maybe no, I don't. I can't even make that argument because it's not even 3 or 4. Maybe what he made in a year as a player, maybe. But I think even that's probably wrong.
Could he have meant that though? No.
Okay, so let's talk about an individual year. Some of these years he made, like his last year as a pro, he made $900,000. I doubt he cleared a $3 million check for that episode. I don't think so. I just don't see it.
Especially since you're saying views are just a few seconds.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Hmm.
I want to see a check. Show me a check, Shannon.
Gauntlet thrown. There you go, Shannon.
Show me a check.
JB,
you can cover up your information. Show me a check.
Why would someone lie? Or is he being? Are the numbers being inflated to him by his team?
I don't think the numbers are being inflated to him. My guess is he was drinking, he was smoking. He may have misspoke.
He's feeling himself. He's he's excited.
Yeah. You don't put out a graphic like that if you're not feeling yourself.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to end up being a mistake. I think that graphic, if I had to bet, I think it's going to end up being a mistake. By the way, Jagged Little Pill, or I'm sorry, former Infatuation Junkie, went double platinum in the States and sold 5 million worldwide. So certainly nothing to sneeze at. Most people would kill.
That is a career album for most people.
For anyone else, just about, except for the upper people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and so you know, but it's tough. It's tough to follow Jagged.
I was just watching her appearance on Letterman playing "You Ought to Know," and I was just blown away. I was just watching this last night, just by chance,
Mhm.
and was blown away by it. It's that was a cool moment to live through, I feel.
Did you catch Music Box?
No.
Music Box is the series that The Ringer is doing with HBO. And they did one on Jagged Little Pill.
No, I'm highly averse to the Ringer's music commentary.
Mhm. I thought the documentary was good, but I thought it was too shallow. I wanted more on her. They did her rise through Jagged Little Pill, and then they kind of left it there. I think the aftermath of Jagged Little Pill is way more interesting. You just made, you know, it's just like with Outkast. The aftermath of Speaker Box to Love Below is way more interesting than coming up with Speaker Box to Love Below. Or I think about even my favorite band, Radiohead. You think they go through their stretch with OK Computer, and then okay, what happens after OK Computer is way more interesting. What happens after Pablo Honey Hits is way more interesting. What happens after Kid A is interesting. You know, like it's not just building up to the moment where she's on top of the world, then we're going away. That was shallow. They got a lot of footage. They found a lot of footage of her from back then.
For the Ringer episode, you're saying?
Yeah, the documentary definitely had you know all sorts of one. Talked to Taylor Hawkins, who was in their band. Talked to different members, different people who were out with her at that time. Talked to her in depth. A lot of interviews. Glenn Ballard was in it heavily. Obviously, he produced the album.
Sure.
And he's an interesting dude. That's a dude who I'd like to hear more about. Obviously, he worked on a bunch of different types of genres and had a crazy amounts of success. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, so he also took this other group under his wing and made what is one of my top picks for like one of the most amazingly produced, mixed sounding albums ever. And it was supposed to come out on his labels for a group named Splashdown, which actually had some following here through WBER.
Okay.
Here in Rochester, WBER is technically a like state-owned BOCES radio station, but they function kind of like AAA or something. Like they actually, the Deftones were BER was one of the first stations in the country where the Deftones got traction. And so Splashdown, this group, was getting traction on BR. So there's this like Rochester tie. But then for whatever reason, Ballard's company decided never to put the album out, and the group has never disclosed why.
Oh, that sucks.
It's floating around out there. It's called Blue Shift, and I think it sounds exquisite. It is. And my thing was like, well, if you're Glenn Ballard, if you made this, why would you prevent it from seeing the light of day?
It's a good question.
Even if you were being vindictive, even if something, I don't even know, we can only speculate what happened, right? But it was so bizarre to me. But yeah, that happened. So I'm interested. I mean, maybe Rick Beato will do an interview with him.
Oh yeah. By the way, shout out to Rick Beato going into the Rochester Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, which is a no-brainer.
Yeah. Giant YouTuber. I watch your stuff. Savvy watches your stuff. Love your stuff.
Yeah, and he also stumbled into his YouTube success. He envisioned the channel as something completely different. And then one thing he did on the side, kind of as a one-off, picked up, and he was like, oh, okay. So he adjusted. And obviously
that's how it usually works.
Adjusted well. You talked about the aftermath of popularity like that. I watched Trent Reznor
Mm,
interviewed on Q when it was still hosted by Gian Gameshi.
yeah.
And Gian asked him, so how did you handle, the rise to fame? And I love Trent Reznor's answer. It's just deadpan. I'd say poorly.
Wow, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah, it was so great. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something. What happens to these people? I mean, Radiohead did not adjust very well.
Mhm.
We're already uncomfortable, actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
with it even before OK Computer, and then you have this squirming, you know,
Mhm.
discomfort with fame that's like be gloriously captured on in the documentary, where they're just like, you can tell how fucking they're just chafing, right, the whole way through that from the very beginning of that movie.
Mhm.
Uh,
I want to. Was it meeting people
Meeting
is
people is
easy?
easy. Yeah, what a great.
Yeah.
It's so perfect. It's like
Oh,
the perfect
which
time.
ironically enough was on tour with Alanis Morissette. They went on
Whoa.
tour. They were on the Jagged Little Pill tour.
But wait, but that's before. That's the Bends then.
My bad. My bad. They were on the Jagged Little Pill tour. They were on tour with Alanis Morissette. Then, because what meeting people is easy. That's the OK Computer
That's
tour.
right after OK Computer,
Okay.
leading into the very, very, very beginnings of what is going to eventually become Kid A, but just barely touching it.
So as if I remember correctly, this is as Tom York is going into his deep depression and is all they hated it. They hated being famous at that point. I think they've adjusted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fame is also their fame is slightly downscaled, slightly. It's not quite as bleh as what it would have been in the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
But yes, they've clearly made an adjustment, but it took them a while to
Sure.
get comfortable. There's a scene in that film, if you'll indulge me for a second. I don't
Yeah,
think
go
you ever
for it.
mind talking about Radiohead, right?
Yeah.
There's a sequence in that film that I love so much where he talks about, I think Tom Cruise might have been in the crowd or backstage or something, or maybe he's speaking hypothetically. I forgot exactly. He goes, yeah, we're going to be polite and say hello, but we're English and we don't give a shit. And like in England, if according to him, if you get famous, the instinct of everyone else around you is, well, what the fuck did you do? We're going to pull you down a notch. You know what I mean? It's like English people are so wry and dour. Like I just love how he talked about that. He's like, yeah, but we're not as easily impressed. I think that's what he said. We're English and we're not easily impressed. I thought that was great. You don't seem to remember that clip.
I don't remember it.
You got to watch that movie again.
It's been a long, long time. I think it was college.
Oh, you got to watch it again, man. I saw it at the Dryden. I saw it in the theater.
Because if I remember correctly, I received I gave my buddy Pat 7 television commercials, which was a DVD of basically their Benz and OK
Mhm.
Computer era of music videos. And he gave me Meeting People is Easy
Mm.
back to back. His birthday was in March. Mine is in May. Shout out to Pat. I think his birthday is like in a day or two. Yeah, I should give Pat a call.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we gave each other Radiohead DVDs, and we saw
Well,
them together for the first time.
okay. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Well, so where's the DVD?
I have no idea.
You got to watch it. It's you that's your homework.
Yeah, you know me. I've moved 48,000 times since 2006.
I did want to ask you, I did want to go back to
Yeah.
something you said way, way, way at the beginning.
Yeah.
About the downward spiral and quote unquote unhappy music.
Yeah.
And just sort of get more of your thoughts on that, because it didn't sound it sounded like you were saying something similar as me, where that album itself doesn't bring you into a state of the state that created the album, right? Like it doesn't make you feel like what he felt making the music.
Okay. Let me broaden it out. I'll mention two of my other favorite songs. The Mercy Seat by Nick Cave and covered by Johnny Cash. Both versions are amazing. And Lord Kill the Pain by the Red House Painters.
I don't know
Alright.
either of those songs. I've never
Alright.
even heard of either of those songs, but okay.
All right. The Mercy Seat is about a guy who is on death row being marched to the electrocution chair. And he's literally talking about his skull is burning. All right. And it's dark as fuck, but it's upbeat. The beat is not bad. Like it's not like trudging listen to. It's kind of like it's like, oh yeah, this is like really, it's really intense, and like but I enjoyed it. And Lord Kill the Pain, which is basically this Mark Kolozek asking for basically everybody in his life to die. And these are very, very dark songs, asking like literally like the world to be drowned, including his friend Sam and his girlfriend, who are making eyes at each other. Right. Yet I've always had this thing throughout my life where that kind of thing doesn't bug me. Like the content of like a dark content doesn't make me sad. It's hard to make me laugh. It's hard to make me cry. Like I watched Glory. All right. And if you watch Glory, you see Denzel Washington get whipped, and it's really sad. It's about basically, the 54th Massachusetts, the Black Regiment, just being basically slaughtered during the Civil War after they come together. It didn't make me sad. I've rewatched Roots. I've rewatched Roots twice. Didn't make me sad. I watched Schindler's List. Schindler's List didn't make me sad. I am in this way, I am kind of Vulcan. I take it in, and I am looking at content through a lens that is not emotion free, but it's hard to get me to those extremes. So this is where I am different. Now let's apply that to the Downward Spiral. Yes, it's dark, but I enjoyed the vibe, and the vibe doesn't change my mood because most art does not.
What about Radiohead?
Doesn't change my mood.
So all the way at the other extreme of that, I mean, I could cry at TV commercials sometimes if I let myself. I kind of have to go with it, or even certainly watching children's films with my daughter. There are moments that I get teared up. But what ends up happening is that like with that case in particular, it's just not the mood that he was going for is not the mood that the music evokes for me. I'm too like I said, taken in by. I almost get pumped listening to that record, and there's parts of it that are kind of reflective and eerie that work really well. But I just feel like I'm like looking at something really beautiful. Not that beauty and sadness and ugliness can't all be in the same ball of wax, but yeah, it's It's interesting. So you're so you by your description, someone could say you sound autistic, and someone by my description could say I sound personality disordered or histrionic by
Yeah.
our responses to music.
There are things that get me irritated that do flare emotions, but it's rarely art.
Mm. Mm. Well, I mean, you're gonna have to watch. You're gonna have to watch. Meeting people is easy.
Yeah, I'll seek it out. It's got to be online somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I think it might even be on Vimeo, a
Okay.
bootleg copy of it. So bootleg
Okay.
upload.
I'll find it. Well, shall we close?
Sure. There's something I
Um,
forgot to tell you about that
Get it?
when
Let
you
it out.
asked me
Let it
what
rip.
I'm up to. I just put out a call on LinkedIn for people, any music journalists or music commentators who YouTubers or talk about music at all, who, this is my call for my fearless army who want to create a new space, a new lane for talking about music that isn't so ideologically captured. And so if you're out there, I want to hear from you because our moment is now. It's now or never to not lose our voices entirely. Um, it just has to be done. I think it's ripe. I think there's an audience waiting. It's kind of like looking at a farm that's been already plowed and tilled and planted. The soil is just screaming to produce fruit. So it's there for the taking, and I want to get a group of music journalists, YouTubers who are going to really bring to the table an alternative to what's there and not just do it in this like red pill, paint by numbers, anti-woke, bitching about wokeness kind of mode. So
I take it Anthony Fantano's not invited.
he doesn't need to join my thing. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's make the call. I hope you build it up. Any way I can assist, let me know.
Well, you're assisting already, so thank you.
Yeah. Alrighty. Anything you're reading, watching, or listening to that you want to share?
Yes, I just started listening to a bunch of really old blues recordings. Jimmy Reed, Memphis Minnie. There's a washboard Sam that I found online, and I'm loving the sound and the vibe of these super old records. Some of them go as far back as the 20s, but it's like the 20s, 30s, 40s. I've never been super into blues. It's never been the thing that grabs me the most, but this stuff with that ambience is totally grabbing me, and I'm like hooked on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I for those who don't know, I love secondhand books.
Mm.
I like books that have wear. I do buy things that are new, but I do like a good secondhand book. So I popped in a Goodwill a couple weeks ago, and I saw a book that I hadn't thought about in a long time, but I thought it would be really interesting to revisit. And I would like to definitely in the coming weeks lay out what I think is really interesting about it. It's called "What's the Matter with Kansas?"
Hmm.
All right.
How conservatives won the. What's the subtitle? How conservatives won the.
How conservatives won the heart of America. This was late in the George W. Bush administration, and this was Thomas Frank's question: is why was Bush so popular? Why is a state like Kansas voting so deeply red? And I want to do kind of a reverse Chuck Klosterman, where how he has sort of in his last couple of works tried to look at the past through the past lens. I want to look at this through a present tense lens. Because the political landscape is very, very different. And so I started to read that, and I will present a book report at some point.
That sounds awesome. Speaking of Megyn Kelly, I just found one of her books or whatever, I forgot what it's called, in one of my neighborhood give a book, take a book boxes. And I found Mike Tyson's autobiography months ago. It's been sitting there. That one I think I will read.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know Megyn. I guess it makes sense. All the Fox News anchors have books.
Right. I mean, you're going to sell them just right. You would think that just that alone is enough to sell. I don't know how many books.
Yeah. Like I have a book from Kat Tenth. I don't know if you know her.
Nope.
She's like a side Fox News person. I saw that at a bookstore, and I picked it up and like but yeah, it's all like it is a cottage industry over there. It seems like a side deal that they have with their talent. Like Bill O'Reilly's had the Killing series, Killing Jesus, Killing Kennedy, Killing Reagan. Like it's just killing books about killings. I think is it Brett Baer that writes about history, I think. So yeah, all the Fox News guys and gals have their own, book career.
Well, again, if only we should be so lucky. So
yeah, maybe who knows? Be very cool. Be on TV all the time. On that note, Sabby Reyes Kokani, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, man. Great talking to you as always.
Yeah, and thank you for the people who stuck with us. And boy, you guys are sticking around for a while. So pumped. All right. Be well.
Chew.
Oh, this is always the awkward part.